Hi, my name is Melanie Campbell. I'm President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and convener of the Black Women's Roundtable. It is truly my honor and privilege to thank you for joining us for another Black Women's Roundtable Power Table Talk. And this week, we're focused on two major things happening simultaneously. First, we know this week is the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, as well as justice. We know last week we had a power table talk, Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention, where the first African-American woman was put into nomination to be a running mate for vice president with Vice President Joe Biden. So the Biden-Harris ticket had their convention last week. And this week, our current president, Donald Trump, is hosting their Republican National Convention. So we'll have a little conversation about those two things this week. So it is my pleasure as your host and moderator to first introduce our first panelist for today, and that is our sister Cleola Brown, President and CEO National President of the A. Philip Randolph Institute. The A. Philip Randolph Institute actually organized the March on Washington on August 28, 1963. And Ms. Brown is a labor leader extraordinaire, a civil rights leader, a social justice warrior. I'll get it in a foxhole, Sister Cleola Brown, any day of the week. And we are at war right now, so we need Sister Cleola Brown and all these sister warriors that are on this conversation. So Sister Cleola, I want to start off with you to talk about the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. Now, you told me this story a long time ago, and I never forgot it. And I was like, wow, you were there at 15 years old, I believe.
That's right.
At the March on Washington. So we want you to tell us what that was like. And then also share with us, as the first woman to be the president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute that you run so excellently. But also tell us about the issues that we need to continue to lift up. Because as we commemorate the 57th anniversary March on Washington, we don't commemorate just for history's sake or her story's sake, because we were there as women leaders as well, that we know that we need to utilize the March on Washington for the 57th anniversary as a call to action. So also in your remarks, tell us what you think we need to use this moment for to move our justice agenda forward. So Sister Brown, I know you're traveling, because women, we have to do it all. So I know we thank you for being on this call, and we're going to turn it over to you to give us our first remarks to those questions.
Well, thank you, my leader, Melanie Campbell. I almost want to call you daughter, because I've watched you grow in such a way that excellence is synonymous with your name. I really admire the way that you work, and I feel every time that you put us on a path to accomplish a piece, it's like getting a training from a new heart and a new energy every single time. Let me apologize to the sisters that are also on this line for me being in a car and traveling, but I had to do a North Carolina hit, but I was going to be here for two reasons, because I think it's important and because I'm afraid of Melanie Campbell. Okay, how about that? But let me start by saying, 57 years ago, long time ago, I was at the march. I was 15 years old. starting to feel like I was a grown up, had just moved from California, where my father and my mom had been stationed because my dad was in the Navy, to Philadelphia because they wanted me to graduate high school from a northern school as opposed to going home to South Carolina for whatever reason. I went to Philadelphia to Simon Gratz High School, determined that I was going to be the biggest, the baddest, the boldest, and all of that kind of good stuff that they rhyme today. But I found myself in really tepid waters. The thinking was different. The progressive activists were missing a bit from what I was used to in California at that time, and certainly what I had gotten used to and it was expected to do from my early years in South Carolina. I need to tell you two things. My mom was 6 feet tall in her stocking feet, so she was an ominous presence from the very beginning. She sent me to my uncle who was 6'4". But at 15, I thought I was grown enough to make a decision on my own. And when I heard about the March on Washington, I decided that I wanted to be there. I wasn't as smart as I thought I was because I did not know what the process was for being included. So I had no passes, no nothing to gain access. But I had a good friend, my one and only friend in Philadelphia, Dolores, who said, I'll go with you. So we were supposed to be headed to school, which we did not do. Um, we went over to her aunt's to leave from there on the Greyhound bus to come to Washington, D.C. for that March on Washington because they were talking a talk of excitement. They were talking about jobs. They were talking about justice. They were talking about equality. And when I heard the voices of the speakers that were announcing the march over the radio, I knew that I wanted to be there with or without permission. We bought our tickets at $2.41 and got on Greyhound with everybody else headed for Washington, D.C. But during that time, it was a family affair, no matter how you got there or who you were traveling with. We had no lunch. We had no other money than bus money, going and coming. But there were sisters on that bus who had those brown paper sacks that were filled with fried chicken or fried ham, lunch meat, also had some pound cake, but more than that, love and willingness to share. And if you were young, you became a youngin' to those women and to some of the men who wanted to protect you going along because they didn't know who we belonged to, but they knew that we were headed where they were. As we traveled, the stories on the buses were amazing. So we were almost prepared for arriving in Washington, D.C., where I had never seen before and had not seen buildings of that sort ever. And upon arrival, they were asking for passes. They were asking for tickets from certain groups, whether it was the NAACP or other groups that were a part of the March Coordinating Committee, to get you through the mall area and to move you to the section where you were assigned to stand. We didn't have it, but what we did spot were some folks, black and white, about our age, crawling up the trees so that they could see. Well, Dee and I picked a tree. And on picking that tree, we made sure that we could see the stage. And the moment that Asa Philip Randolph opened his mouth, I was electrified. I heard this man talk about principles and policies that I had never heard discussions before. And as Bayard Rustin was organizing the speakers on the stage and announcing here and there as the pieces went along who was the next speaker, and I heard the name of Martin Luther King, did not know who he was at the time, had heard a little something about him, but he just looked like a young, short guy to me. John Lewis was also there, and a speaker that I would hear from on that same day. And then there were the magnificent women that were there who I was later to become a soror of. But I heard a voice that came from a Mahalia Jackson that wasn't the song that she was singing. We could hear real good because the UAW had provided some of the amplifiers that, where I am now, the House of Labor, did not willingly support the march, refused to supply. And then I got clarity as I got older. Martin was standing waiting to speak. Dr. King, rather, was standing waiting to speak. And Mahalia Jackson was saying to him, tell him about your dream, Martin, because he took a while to start speaking. And that's where the I Have a Dream speech came from. And it was confirmed later years when I got to know some of those principals that were standing there and were a part of those conversations. But then when I took the time to look out over the crowd was the first time I said, thank you, Lord, for giving me the courage to do this. I also prayed that I would get such a bad whipping that I couldn't go to school to follow it. God accepted my thanks for having me to get there, but he did not delay that whipping that my uncle put on my behind when we got back to Philadelphia. But it was an impression that was made that I live to this day to really appreciate. Looking at proud Black people dressed in their Sunday best to come out and stand for justice, to stand for the right to jobs that were equal in pay, to stand for equality of treatment and access. It was a teaching that was going on. It wasn't a rally. It was a lesson in dignity that was happening. And it did change the way that as a 15-year-old girl that I thought about who I was in this Black skin would make a difference. And 16 years ago, I had the honor of becoming the first female to serve as president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute. And when the reality of being asked to do so hit me, that I was now in the seat and in the shoes of the man that I admired so much, that led that rally that changed my life, it was overwhelming. I talked to Melanie a lot. And when we talked and I was able to share that with her, I went home after the conversation and had my own ugly woman cry, because the blessing that I received on that day has been the encouragement and the push for understanding that we must fight for every single issue that we believe in, that they're not gifts that are going to be given, but every single victory or every single entitlement has to be won over and over again. And to those of us who have been privileged to walk through this for 50 plus years, we understand that challenge that is there. And we also understand that we have a responsibility to build behind us and beside us. So, sisters, I say thank you for letting me share my stories with you today. But I also encourage each of us to pull one or two young sisters along the way with you and share even the things that you think is just private. And you don't know whether or not that will give them the encouragement to move on. But let's teach them how to celebrate the victories as they go on. We have a Black woman nominated for the position of Vice President of the United States. That's a biggie. That's a big one for Black women. It's a big one for Black people in general. Let's celebrate, but also let's get energized, as the whole march talked about, to go and do what John Lewis challenges us to do. Go and get into some good trouble. Let's make this happen. So I thank you, Melanie, for your leadership. You are incredible. You are more than that. You are always inclusive. And I thank you for that. So sisters, my apologies as I get on another call, but this was so important. I would not miss this opportunity. And I thank you for indulging me. Take good care, Melanie, and enjoy the rest of the call. I'm going to look at the recorded version a little bit later. Take good care.
Clay, before you walk away, we just got to sit in that for a second. Got to sit in that for a second. And I thank God for you and your sharing that story. It's more than a teachable moment. It's I don't want to get emotional, but I really am in this moment. And I've heard you tell the story, but there's something about you telling it today in the time that we're in that makes it that much more of an honor and a privilege to know you as my sister, my mentor, my leader. And again, like I say, a warrior in this fight that we're in for justice, for racial justice, for economic justice, for workers' rights, for LGBTQ rights, for immigration rights, the right to just live without fear, without intimidation, and so many other voting rights. And I get in trouble, but fight to make sure that this land we sit in, this United States of America, lives up to what it says it's about. And we're in an inflection moment as we prepare for the 57th March on Washington. And also today is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. Although we know, all of us on this call, women of color, know that it wasn't until 1965. And I know if you were in 63, you was around somewhere in 65, even if you was watching.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, indeed.
A lot of us were born and some of us weren't on this call. That's why it's intergenerational. I just wanted to thank you for that and get back to my mode of being a dutiful moderator and host. And thank you. And we love you. And
thank
be safe
you very
out there.
Much.
I know you got your mask and your gloves and your PPEs.
Thank you so much.
And so, and it's apropos to you talk about young folks to have our next person to come up, and we're all young. I'm wearing my young people colors and all. We're still young, just more seasoned. It's Sister Ebony Riley.
Yes.
Ebony Riley, Quiet Storm. Young Sister Lita is the head of the Washington Bureau for the National Action Network, and led by Reverend Al Sharpton. And we know that NAN has partnered with Martin Luther King III to lead the 57th anniversary March on Washington commemoration in partnership, of course, with A. Philip Randolph Institute, the National Coalition, NAACP, National Urban League, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, LDF, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and many other organizations. And Ebony, we just so glad you could take a minute. We know that it's coming up in 2 days and lots happening in those days. And we thank you for your leadership. And so we wanted you to stop through. We know you have to jump on and jump off. There's a lot of things. Those who ever done a march or any kind of organizing know it's a lot behind the scenes. Just share with us what the call to action is for the 57th anniversary and how folks can tune in and participate in DC and of course across the country. So Ebony, we turn it over to you and thank you for joining us and your leadership.
Good afternoon, ladies. I am honored to be on this call with all of you and I follow in your footsteps in terms of leadership. So it's an honor. Melanie, thank you for having me on the call on this Zoom today. I am technically right in the middle of the midst of March planning. We are at the MLK Memorial Library downtown. It's not open, but we're using it and we're socially distanced March organizing. So I want to also just also flag that Unidos US is also one of our proud partners. So I just wanted to flag, since we have President Murguia on the call today. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, sorry, Janet.
That's okay. We have a lot of partners. So I just wanted to lift her up also. And our rallying cry is get your knee off our necks. Melanie, you spoke to that. President Brown spoke to that as well about some of the issues that we're facing, these economic rights, voting rights, and other challenges that our communities face. And the rallying cry, as you all know, came from the George Floyd Memorial, and Reverend Sharpton announced at the eulogy. So we're excited to have, this rallying cry, but also we have pre-march items that are our coalition of partners, our civil rights organizations came together, including Melanie, the Black Women's Roundtable, and we decided to have pre-march activities as well as post-march activities. So it's just a launching pad for the work that's yet to come. We know that we have the elections in November, so we're mobilizing, we're requiring and asking folks to participate in the census. In addition to that, we are asking and seeking and working with you, Melanie, on your unity campaign on poll working and poll monitoring. So we're focused on that and getting that drive and that goal met for our community to show up to the polls as a monitor, as well as mobilized to vote. Even if that's by mail, we're going to be mobilized to vote. The other thing that we really want to lift up is a comprehensive legislation around police reform. We know we've just seen what has happened in the last several days amidst all that's happening within 2020. So you have a double pandemic, you have racism, and then you have COVID. And this is an issue that we're calling for. We want a fix. We have two federal legislative pieces that we want to fix to. One is the John Lewis legislation around voting rights that's stuck and it's not being brought to the floor in the Senate. And also the Justice and Policing Act, which most of these groups on the phone were around the launching pad for, and that's also not being moved to the floor in the Senate for a vote. So those are some of the things that we're calling for in person this Friday. And we're so ready. We are COVID ready. You cannot get on the premises without a temperature check. We have thousands of masks, gloves, hand sanitizers as well. And we've been working very diligently to make sure everyone remains safe. We have contactless voter registration. Once you receive your demonstration sign, it's a QR code from When We All Vote, which is our coalition partner, and you pop that up on your phone and you can register or check your voter status. So we're serious. We have our census language ready. Melanie, we're looking forward to your video that's going to be in loop as folks gather. So we have messages queued up, and it's an intergenerational inclusive march. So I just want to be clear, we are young people out of the DC Bureau office planning this march. I am under 40, and fortunately and unfortunately, I'm the first Black woman to plan a major march in a pandemic. And so we also have the youngest policy office in DC in a civil rights organization. So we are intergenerational and inclusive inside, internally, and outside. So we're looking for justice for these families who will also be in attendance. Folks can tune in on our website, www.nationalactionnetwork.net. It will also be aired on MSNBC, C-SPAN, CNN, and YouTube. So I would also check out the NAACP will also be streaming it live as a companion to the in-person option. It's going to be their virtual option. So they'll also be streaming of the webcast. So we're looking forward to this in-person in Washington, D.C. We also have rallying cities that will have in-state rallies, especially in those hotspot states where folks were unable to come to D.C. So we are energized and we're galvanized towards this goal. We want the knee off our necks. That's what we're calling for. And it's just been re-energized with what has happened, unfortunately, recently in the last few days. So we look forward to having everyone turn out, but this is just the beginning. It's a launching pad and our goal is justice.
Thank you, Ebony. So very, very much. And for all you all are doing. And I know most of the young leaders on your team. So I know that you are the A team getting it done intergenerationally. And so we will make sure to continue. Thank you for sharing all of that information. And I know you have to go and know that we're there with you. And thank you all for all you're doing for our people.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies. It's an honor.
Thank you. And now it is I'm so excited to move to our next sister who I have admired and have had many opportunities to be in a room. She's a quiet storm in many ways. And again, Jan, I thank you for your leadership as you head up UNIDOS US. I still want to say National Council of Raza, so I'm like, I practice UNIDOS US. And as the president and CEO of that awesome organization that's been around for so many decades. And we know, Sister Janet, we know that what I really wanted to kind of get into, because we wanted to do this Women of Color conversation, because we know the March on Washington was a rainbow coalition, as Reverend Jackson says, of folks from all walks of life, from all races, ethnicities. But we also know that there was a lot going on in many movements. And so for the Latino community who we're in solidarity with, tell us how the 1963 march impacted the movement for the Latino community, and then juxtaposed to where we are now in this movement that we're in, and how we need to work consolidated, which we do, but just give us some highlights of what you think we need to really focus on as a part of that call to action. So Sister Janet, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I just can't tell you how honored I am to be included. Not surprised. You at every turn have been someone I've also admired and been proud to work with. And you've always made inclusion a top priority. I think you have set the standard for understanding that in unity there is strength, and in that strength there is power. So really appreciate it. All these women of color look to you, and we're happy to be here today. And I'm honored to be among these distinguished panelists. These Cleola Brown stories were just amazing, and I've heard them in different ways, but such powerful voices and such powerful work being led by these women of color. Thank you, Melanie, for bringing us together. Look, you're right to point out about the Rainbow Coalition that did exist in many ways.
She's asking them questions, but she's way off script, so I really don't know. I mean, she's kind of scripted, but not really. So it sounds a little different.
Holly, you're on the mic.
So we know about these technical difficulties. Melanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So
as well as the back end. So
hey,
everybody keep your stuff in order.
Hey, we're making it work. We're making this work, and it's all part of getting these important stories and messages out. But you're right. The march, the original march, had an enormous impact on the Latino civil rights movement. You know, I think it's important to share that my predecessor, Raul Izaguirre, volunteered to set up a first aid station at the 1963 march. He had been a medical technologist in the Air Force. His participation inspired him to set up a Latino civil rights group, which would become our organization as it was begun and founded, the National Council of La Raza, which started in 1968. But his inspiration was the March on Washington. And I would also point out that, Cesar Chavez, we all know as part of our history, was the head of the farm worker movement. He and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. corresponded regularly, although they never got a chance to meet in person. But in 1966, at the height of Cesar's first fast to bring attention to the plight of the farm workers, especially the migrant farm workers, he received a telegram that was very powerful and revealing, I think, about both of our movements. And it was from Dr. King, which said that our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity. So Unidos US today, through our journey, stands on the shoulders of these movements and these giants. One of my first priorities when I became head of the organization, which is now 15 years ago, the first Latina to head this organization, was to refresh and strengthen the ties between Latino and Black communities. And I'm proud to have been asked to be the first Hispanic to keynote the MLK breakfast in Birmingham, Alabama. We've been working hard. I was honored, as so many of you have done, but to actually have marched with the late Congressman John Lewis on the Edmund Pettus Bridge as the commemorative visits to Selma continued in order to raise up the commonality behind our cause, but also to make sure that we work together on those causes and seeing those common objectives. And I'm going to be speaking, as Ebony pointed out, at the March on Friday, where I plan to share with participants there the fact that our struggles are really one, and that Latinos and Latinas don't just empathize with the Black community, we identify with the Black community. And, we have a saying in Spanish that says, tu lucha es mi lucha. your fight is my fight. And I feel like we understand right now, especially in this time. Melanie, you asked me to talk about what we're facing today. You know, the march this week is an important opportunity to bring greater attention to the issues that we're facing in this COVID pandemic environment, and understanding that it's having a disproportionate impact on communities of color. But also importantly, we're still battling the issue of police brutality and racism in these institutions of law enforcement, and how it impacts young men of color. We saw it this week again in the horrific shooting of Jacob Blake. And, you know, we also saw it last week with a young man named Omar, an unarmed veteran who was arrested on unclear charges and whose head was slammed into concrete by officers in Beaumont, Texas on Sunday. According to an analysis by the Washington Post, I think it's important for folks to understand Latino men are second only to Black men in the incidence of law enforcement shootings involving unarmed victims. You know, we need actions and we need answers. We need to stop demonizing protesters and start listening to the very real concerns that they have with the discriminatory criminal justice system. And Ebony is right. We've joined forces together as a coalition to call for passage as a first step of the Justice in Policing Act. We need to actually see real reforms. And so we're part of that collective coalition because we see the collective outcomes as at least moving us forward there. But I think we acknowledge and we understand that beyond legislation, we've got to address the systemic racism as a nation. And that starts with acknowledging the original sin of slavery. And we have a lot of work to do as a country. I'm hoping we can do that work together among people of color and others to make sure that we have to address those systemic inequalities that we're seeing not just in policing, but now in our healthcare system and our economic systems. And again, we are likely to get sick as people of color and more likely to die and more likely to have our jobs or wages cut as a result of this pandemic. And that's a result not just of the pandemic itself, but of the systemic inequalities that we've seen in those systems of health and within our economy. And we also have been seeing so many people of color on the front lines as essential workers, putting their lives at stake. And we're still suffering from those disproportionate impacts. But we haven't seen our communities receive the investments or the kind of help from the stimulus and relief packages passed by Congress. We need to get everyone who's listening here today, everyone who's participating in the march, to contact their senators and tell them to pass legislation similar to the HEROES Act that was passed by the House 2 or 3 months ago, because that aid is necessary right now. And it's urgent for us collectively to work together and make sure we're addressing these challenges, because Melanie, as you and I know, we share a common vision for the future and what we think America can be. And we have shared values about what that vision should look like. And it's one that first and foremost recognizes that diversity is a strength for this country and represents the future of this country. So we're happy to be part of this movement alongside with you, Melanie, and these wonderful leaders. But we're ready to continue this fight for fairness, for justice, and for equity. And, you know, the more that we can be unified, and our name as an organization means unity, Unidos US. It's an invitation for others to join us, and it's a call to action for us all to move together. Thank you, Melanie, for including me today.
And thank you. And one more quick follow-up. So
Okay.
what are y'all doing to ensure that Latino women leverage their leadership and power at the ballot box. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, we know last week was a Democratic National Convention. We did a table talk then, and right now the Republican National Convention is going on in its way.
Yeah.
Nonpartisanly speaking.
Yeah, well,
doing what it's doing. Just if you could quickly tell us that, and then I want to queue up my sister,
yeah.
Christine.
Just quickly, I'll just say, and Ebony obviously is emblematic of what so many young women of color are doing today. They are already acting and leading, and we're seeing that among our younger Latinas as well. But we're especially seeing Latinas, as I referenced, on the front lines of the pandemic as essential workers. And Latinas are the largest and fastest growing group of small business owners. So they're moving forward from an entrepreneurial standpoint to lead and try to build even in the midst of all this challenge. And I also feel like it's important to acknowledge that many of our younger Latinas see the importance of voting, and they're leading the voting drives that we're seeing happening. They're leading the census drives. They understand that it's important to be counted and for our votes to count. And so they're doing so much, even many of these young women who are often undocumented. They know no other country, they're dreamers, but they've adopted this country. They are American in every other sense of the word, and they are contributing in so many ways to make sure that the change that we see in this country is reflective of our values. So we have a lot to look forward to when we see the young Ebonies out there and the young Cristinas, the Marias, but all of these young women coming together, leading and understanding that by leading, they're executing on getting people to the polls, registering people, and making sure that we're full participants in this electoral process, and that we're going to make sure we call out any barriers to voting, and that we're going to make sure that we get our communities to the polls on election day. Our young Latinas are all in.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you so very much again for your leadership and for joining us at this Power System Power Table Talk today. We appreciate you, and you again going out there. Be careful. I know you will at the march, and I'll be there in spirit for sure. Wish I could physically be there, but we all have to make those individual choices based on what's happening. But I'm there. I'm there.
I know you are.
Christine Chen, my friend of 25 years, as I celebrate this month, my 25th anniversary at the National Coalition. You were one of the first sisters I met somewhere in those first couple of years where you were organizing and mobilizing API. And I remember us doing trainings together and all kinds of things. And I know that you are the executive director of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote. I wanted to say the whole name. I know it's API Vote, but everybody doesn't know what that means. We'll make sure. And I appreciate your leadership over these years, and you've never wavered from fighting for civil rights and social justice and women's rights and so many other things. And so again, looking and thinking about the 57th anniversary March on Washington and how it impacted the APIA community as it relates to that. Can you share a little bit about that, and then what that means, and what are the core issues that we need to be addressing? And then the last component of that would be what I just asked our sister Janet is, I said, what's happening with API women and leveraging your power at the ballot box and other elements of society. Turn it over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Melanie. I mean, I really appreciate the friendship that we've had the last 25 years. I mean, it really has allowed myself as well as to galvanize the Asian American Pacific Islander community to be able to work with allies and friends like you, and to really learn from the African American community. Because when you look back, even at the March on Washington in 1963, the Asian American population was very small. at that particular time, you have to realize it was only 20 years before that the Chinese Exclusion Act was finally lifted. And so in 1963, we really were relying on the Japanese American Citizens League and their leadership as part of the civil rights movement and being an ally group participating during that moment. They especially understood the importance of working together because they were racially profiled and over 120,000 US citizens were interned because of that during that time period. But because of the movement, the March on Washington, that really was a catalyst point in terms of making sure that the political atmosphere was open enough for changes, which led to the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. The 1965, this particular piece of legislation essentially removed earlier quota systems based on national origin and established a new immigration policy in regards to reuniting immigrant families. So as a result of that, that's when you saw a rise of Asian American immigrants coming into the United States. It was only because of then that we were able to come in, become US citizens, and then eventually look into voting. And of course, we all know that also led to the National Voting Rights Act of 1965, which really led the way in terms of making sure that all communities of color are that we prevent discrimination on the basis of race, color, or membership in a particular language minority community. So it really was the work of the African American community and those in 1963 early on. We've really have benefited from those policies and the continued work. For the Asian American Pacific Islander community, we believe that there is a linked fate among all the communities of color. I mean, there is, as noted earlier, continued systematic inequalities, and we've seen this, especially in the last 6 months, in terms of how COVID-19 has transpired. But because of that, we've also have seen that Asian American Pacific Islanders are also facing a rise of racism and anti-Asian sentiment, as well as hate crimes. Because right now, whether it's through, because many of this is really exacerbated when candidates and elected officials name COVID-19 and imply that COVID-19 is the fault of people that look like me. Of Asian Americans, of Chinese Americans. And, in addition to that, we've seen the last few months in terms of our work in the communities, especially on the local level, of how the Asian American Pacific Islander families are having these conversations because there is the younger generations coming home, having these conversations about what does Black Lives Matter? What does that actually mean? How's that related to their own lives? How's it interconnected in terms of the broader communities of color? And what do we need to do to support one another? I think it's been really amazing to see that, especially for 2020, I feel like the discussions have been a lot more meaningful and we've been moving forward because of a combination of all these things are happening. At the same time, we're also seeing that there's being more obstacles are also being placed on all of our communities into ensuring that we have an accurate count for the census and how that really leads to political representation as well as resource allocations for all of our communities, right? So it's really a combination of all these different factors that the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, I believe, are more prepared and more energized to register and cast their ballot for this particular election cycle. I think in the past, we had challenges in terms of continuously educating our community, which is 2/3 first-generation immigrants, about connecting the dots in regards to how policy decisions are being made by those who are elected officials and how that impacts your own life. But right now, everyone is tuning into their local, state, and federal level elected officials to find out, can their children go back to school? Can we all go back to work? Can we start gathering together once again? It's really based on the decisions that are being made. And so we understand that when we decide to register and go vote, it's going to make an implication, a direct implication in terms of how that impacts our lives. You also asked that, what are AAPI women doing during this time period? I think Asian American Pacific Islander women are also really energized for the fact that we have a lot more AAPI candidates running for office, whether that's on the local level as well as on the congressional level. A number of them are also very energized for the fact that it's been a historic moment this last couple of weeks with the nomination of Senator Kamala Harris as being part of the presidential ticket, because not only is she a Black woman, but she also has immigrant heritage as being an Indian American. And she also will then, I think a lot of people believe that because of that, her background and her upbringing, she will also understand the issues that immigrant families also face. So they're looking forward to diving in a lot deeper and having conversations and learning about the candidates. But because I think a lot more AAPI women are running for office, as well as organizing the last 6 months for a wide variety of different things have happened and transpired, that they're all more energized. And we're seeing more organizations that have never participated in voter registration drives reaching out to AAPI Vote and asking what's the most effective way for them to actually participate and help register more voters.
Thank you, Christine, again. And yeah, the time has gone by. It just seemed like yesterday, but it hasn't been just yesterday. And I appreciate you so much again for your leadership. Sister Janice Mathis, where are you? I can't see you on my screen. Technology. There she is. There you are. These boxes, Zoom world, we're in the Zoom and all other kinds of things that we do. So Janice, we know, and thank you for your sisterhood, both in Delta Sigma Theta, Sorority Incorporated world, the National Council of Negro Women world, and all you have done for so many decades, fighting for civil rights, knowing that you work right side by side with Reverend Jesse Jackson for many years, helping him to lead the Rainbow Push Coalition, and all that you do each and every day to lift up the power of women, and knowing that you're the executive director of the National Council of Negro Women. And we know that our sister leader, the late Dr. Dorothy Irene Height, led that organization for many years. She was one of the very few women who are leaders who were there, along with Diane Nash at the 1963 March on Washington. And wanted you to kind of give us a perspective about this movement we're in then and now as it relates to Black women, women of color, and give us your perspective on how we leverage our leadership and own our political power in this critical moment that we've been hearing and sharing here today on this Power Table Talk. Janice, turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Melanie. I'm happy to do that and thankful to have the opportunity. But before I do that, I must say how appreciative I am of your convening power and your systematic way of bringing us together, and for leading us to some historic choices that have been made recently. It is just a privilege to be part of this coalition of women. And thank you for that question that you said in your question, said, well, how has women's leadership changed? And I want to get to that, but first I want to give just a little bit of context. 1920, today is Women's Equality Day. 1920 was not the beginning of that struggle, and 2020 clearly is not the end. I mean, if you go all the way back to 1776, Abigail Adams said to her husband, who would become president of something that would become the United States, said, don't give all the power to the men and the husbands. If you do, we will foment a rebellion, and we'll rise up against any law that we didn't have any part in participating in. So this is an old struggle, and I would submit that it is yet incomplete. There was an amendment to amend the Constitution as far back as 1848. Of course, it didn't pass until some 72 a lifetime later, 72 years later, it passed as the 19th Amendment. And at that, my mother happened to have been born in 1920, but she didn't vote until 1948 because in South Carolina, where we were from, they had something called a white Democratic primary. And the Democratic Party was the only game in town at that time, the only party that ran primaries. And so she didn't vote until 1948, and then it was 65 in the Voting Rights Act, and then the struggle to enforce it and get it reauthorized. One of the ways that we're connected is through James Orange and a massive effort to get the Voting Rights Act reauthorized back in the 90s. And then, you know, the sad decision that I know my sister Kristen is going to know a whole lot more about than I do, but just what we are suffering through today goes back to Shelby versus Holder and taking the enforcement mechanism out of the Voting Rights Act. And so here we are, still trying to get into good trouble and realizing that the only way to do that, I don't think anything has affected me in the news as much lately as the Jacob Blake situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I have been saying, and others have been saying, that implicit bias won't fix avowed racism. I mean to be racist. I don't mean to be fair. I am not inclined to be just. What we saw with Jacob Blake, implicit bias training won't fix that because it wasn't implicit, it was explicit. It was meant. And then to see a young man, I thought about Dylan Roof at Mother Emanuel Church and how he was allowed to leave there well and go get a meal and was treated with the dignity and respect that all citizens are entitled to. But then you compare that to what happened to Jacob Blake, and they're holding his shirt and shooting him at the same time with 3 children in the backseat of the car. There's something fundamentally unjust about all of that. And then a young man with a rifle shooting, apparently aimed his rifle and shot at 2 people and perhaps killed them, is allowed to walk away from the police, not even questioned, not touched. There's something deeply unjust about what is happening in the streets of America. And frankly, we're being led in that direction. But that's not the question you asked me, Mel. You asked me, how has women's leadership changed? I think in a number of ways. I think today's call is an example of the kind of collaboration that women are naturally drawn to and do good at. And so again, thank you for being one of those who make sure that we stay in touch with each other. The other idea is an insistence on equality. Dr. Haidt was one of the few women of her time, and I would submit Dr. Bethune before her, who insisted on having equal authority with men in public affairs. Now, that is not so much a new thing as it is something that young women insist on as a matter of course. And I think that's the success of the movement. The other thing is that the collaboration and insistence on equality, and to some extent intergenerational, which NCNW is getting better at. That was one of the 2 things that Dr. Cole insisted on as she took on the presidency of NCNW. And I'm proud to say that we'll have over 250 young adults who are registered to attend our convention, which comes up, got to put in the plug, September 24th through the 27th. And we have a very exciting agenda. And thanks to you, we're going to be training poll monitors. And we're going out on tour again, like we did last year with the HBCUs, although virtually, to talk about adulting the vote. When they go low, we go vote. And so that's what we kind of got lined up for the rest of the year, and or at least until November. And we're grateful for this opportunity. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so very much, Sister Janice. Thank you so very much. Now, so we'll stay on time because we have a second panel, and I promise I would make sure that we end it on time. Sister Kristen Clark, who is the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, sister colleague in the civil rights and social justice movement. It is so good to see you in this virtual world that we're living in. We know during the summer of 1963, civil rights groups were demonstrating and taking other collective public actions to call attention to the end of discrimination and segregation in education and employment and voter participation and public accommodations, especially throughout the South. We know the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law was formed during this time. And as the awesome leader that you are leading the Lawyers Committee, can you tell us what you see the most critical threats are to our civil rights and democracy today? And if you all ladies who can stay on, I did want to, before you leave, just ask you to give us a quick round robin about the Republican National Convention that's taking place. And if you, anything you'd like to say about what you see different about what happened last week and this week, in a quick round robin after we hear from our sister, Kristen Clark. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, an honor to be in the trenches working with you, doing this work, and a privilege to be here today with all of these exceptional women. Any day where I get to, spend time and be in fellowship with fellow women in the struggle is a really great day. So thanks to all of you for the important work that you are doing. These are trying and turbulent times for sure. And I am just inspired by the leadership of so many women and women of color that we're seeing at this time. Melanie wanted to open by sharing a quote from Congressman John Lewis, the late John Lewis, who was 23 years old at the time of the march. He was chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee when he spoke at the march. And while up there, he said, "We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We are tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again." And then you holler, "Be patient." How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. And it's remarkable to think about how relevant and powerful and poignant his words are right now. It's a reminder that we have been fighting and struggling for decades. And while we have made progress, we know that the progress is fragile. And at this very moment, we're seeing a lot of that progress unravel right before our very eyes. The events unfolding in Kenosha also have me deeply disturbed right now. There's a lot that we need to understand and process about what happened last night, but I have no doubt that yesterday, August 25th, 2020, will go down as a dark day in our nation's history. You have people who are traumatized and who are grieving over the shooting of Jacob Blake, and who are doing the only thing that they can, using their voice and raising their voice and calling for an end to police violence. And the National Guard is out. You've got law enforcement out in war mode, in military tanks, in riot gear, firing pepper spray on people who are just crying out and saying enough is enough. And it appears that a white male armed with an AR-15 fired shots that led to loss of life last night. And it appears that this man was welcomed by law enforcement. Apparently, they told him, "We appreciate you being here." They offered him water. And again, we still have a lot to learn about what happened last night, but it is most evident and clear that we are a nation being ripped apart by police violence, by racial violence, by white supremacy, by armed militias, by groups that are walking in our streets openly and hoodless right now, some of them with the full protection of law enforcement. So these are dark and turbulent times that remind us that we have a lot of important work to do to get our democracy back on track. And so, Melanie, to your question, I deem this one of the gravest threats that we face right now. The threat to Black lives is real. And it is not just the shooting of unarmed Black people and people of color by law enforcement. It is these vigilante groups that are out in open carry states that are walking through the streets with their weapons and actually using them on people and resulting in loss of life. So what can we do? We got to keep marching. We got to keep protesting. We got to keep using our voices. One of the things that we have been doing at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law is standing up for people who are protesting. Many of us saw that vicious assault that played out in the shadow of the White House in Lafayette Square, where federal law enforcement, at the behest of Attorney General Barr, used force against people who were peacefully demonstrating in response to the shooting of George Floyd, in response to the killing of Breonna Taylor. These were people peacefully assembled. Our clients include a 9-year-old boy and his mother. Our clients include a veteran and religious leaders. This was a multi-generational group just peacefully lifting up their voices before our federal law enforcement, without provocation and without notice, used force to disperse the crowd. So we filed Black Lives Matter DC versus Trump and have been going to the courts around the country to stand up for people who are marching and protesting. Standing up and protecting protesters is really critical because they are the ones that are making it uncomfortable for officials to just turn a blind eye to the problems that we're dealing with. But there's November, and the voter suppression that we are up against right now is real. This is voter suppression fueled by a pandemic that has had a starker impact on Black people and people of color. This is a pandemic that's making it harder for people to vote in the ways that they would ordinarily vote. We've got a US Postal Service that is being weaponized to fuel voter suppression right now. We sued them last week, sued Louis DeJoy. We're not going to stand by and leave it to chance that he's going to get it right. We're going to hold him accountable and make him undertake the remedial action that is necessary to get the Postal Service back on track. But I think it's really critical that we all work right now to make sure that nobody's waiting until the last minute this election season. We got to start looking at this moment as election season right now and make sure that our communities are empowered with the information that they need to get out and understand how they're going to vote in 2020. Are you going to wait till election day? Are you going to go during early voting? Are you in a state where you can vote by absentee ballot? Now's the time to start figuring out those questions and making sure that everybody else in your household and in your circle knows the answers to these questions too. With many of the groups here, we lead the Election Protection Coalition, and we're working every single day around the clock to get people answers to these questions. 866 Our Vote is the number that I hope people will plug into their speed dial. 866 Our Vote. We are here. We have lawyers and advocates on deck to make sure that all of our communities are empowered with the information that they need to have their voice heard this season. So this is a moment where we're going to take the protest from the streets to the ballot box in 2020.
Thank you so much, Kristen Clark, for your leadership. I'm going to give our panelists, we give our panelists an awesome, I do this, a star award for your leadership. My great niece let me borrow her magic wand. She's 7. So she likes me to use it and shift. I want to thank you all. And I'm going to, because of time, not ask that last question, because I think in many ways we covered a lot of it. I just want to thank you all for your leadership, your sisterhood is what we call it, and all that you're doing. And again, I appreciate being sister warriors with you in this movement for justice. And together we are the leaders we're looking for. I thank you. And I thank the Roland Martin Unfiltered for being our media partner. And it's my pleasure to transition us from power table number 1 to power table number 2. And the topic for this power table number 2 is the power of Black women's leadership and vote in 2020. Our panelists will also share their analysis on what's happening at the Republican National Convention, just as we did for our power table, Black Women's Power Table last week. We also invite you to follow Black Women's Roundtable on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. And follow Black Women's Roundtable so you can always find out what we're doing. And it's my pleasure to then now transition and turn over this power table to our sister leader, Holly Holiday, Esquire, who is the Unity 2020 National Campaign Manager for the National Coalition, who will move us forward with this awesome power table number 2. And of course, I got to do a shout out to all of the sisters and also, of course, my mentor board members before I leave, Sister Cora Masters-Berry, Sister Felicia Davis, Solange Benton, and all of you ladies who are leading on the ground in the States and nationally. I'm going to get on the other side of the camera and watch and do my shouting out from there. So thank you. Love you all. And I'll give you all your sister now, because I won't be here on the other side. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melanie. And boy, was that a powerful conversation that we just had. And we have so much more to come. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. You all know I love talking about what's happening on the ground. And boy, do I have the right people for this conversation. I want to just open us up by acknowledging that we're going to be having a conversation today about the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. I had the opportunity to go back and look at some clips courtesy of our National Museum on African American History and Culture, and it is amazing how so many of those themes and issues are still resonating with us today. At the same time, we're going to ask you to provide some analysis on what's happening at the Republican National Convention. And further, we know that today is the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage movement. And although Black women showed up, we did not gain the right to vote without fear of intimidation until the 1965 voting rights was asked. So with that, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you all the panel that we're going to have for our power table number 2 today. We're going to start out with the political scientist extraordinaire, board member, and former First Lady of the District of Columbia, Dr. Cora Masters-Berry. We'll then hear from Felicia Davis, who's the director of the HBCU Green Fund and convener of the Clayton County, Georgia Black Women's Roundtable. Also joining us from Florida, organizer extraordinaire and convener of the Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation, as well as the Florida Black Women's Roundtable and the Florida Black Men's Roundtable. We welcome Solange Benton. Holding it down in Southern Alabama, we have Letitia Daniels Jackson, who's the convener of the Southern Alabama BWR Black Women's Roundtable there. We have the Reverend Dr. Judith Seymour from Pittsburgh, Mon Valley Black Women's Roundtable, as well as the founder of Sisters Saving Ourselves Now. In Georgia, joining us is the executive director and my soror in pink, love you sis, the executive director of Georgia Stand Up and the Unity BWR state partner there. And of course, we cannot forget one of my second homes, from the great state of Michigan, Tamika Ramsey, who joins us from the Detroit area, who's the convener of the Michigan Coalition on Black Civic Participation and Eastern Michigan Black Women's Roundtables. Ladies, we have so much to talk about. So without further delay, thank you again for joining. And I'm going to get this question started. And we know we have to start with our political scientist and historian of the bunch, Mrs. Berry. As a historian, political science, and organizer, we really need to hear from you on how we use this historic moment of the 57th anniversary on the March on Washington and the current Black Lives Matter movement to move our Black agenda forward. There seems to be so much overlap here. Also, are you hearing Black issues being raised in the Republican National Convention? So as we think about these issues, things that we know we are fighting for, do we hear the Republicans resonating those issues? Ms. Berry?
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Glad to see
afternoon.
you guys called me. I'm over here at my office at the Southeast Tennis and Learning Center where the magic happens.
Yes.
And we're in the process of, and Melanie knows this, we're going up virtually. So we're here filming our young people to put together a production that was supposed to go up in March before COVID hit, called Vote, Your Choice, Your Life.
Oh, I
And
love
so
that.
we have updated it, obviously, because so much has gone on since March. And so today we're here and we're in the round room, so to speak, and we have all the accoutrements of the cameras and the green screen, and we're doing it virtually. So it's really a challenge, but it's interesting also. So I'm here for that. So I'm doing the show from there. And with that being said, you caught me taking one bite of food. I went off camera, just one quick, because I hadn't eaten anything. So I apologize for that. But I think about the March on Washington, and I think about the suffrage movement. And one of the characters in our Blacks and Wax production is a character which is Ida B. Wells. And her script or her comments talk about the suffrage movement and how even though they were fighting for the rights of women, they were not fighting for the rights of Blacks. And how many of the suffragists, that the head suffrage, so-called, Susan B. Anthony, was quite a little racist and had a lot of negative racial tones. So when they started off to have that march, they did not include us, but we vote-hearted our way. And as Ida B. Wells says in her memoirs, when the march came down the street, they got behind the Illinois delegation and they marched with them. And she ended by saying, we got where we needed to go, but we didn't get there together and they didn't want us there. So I say all of that to say, to use the terminology I use on a podcast on Rolling Out podcast called There's Nothing New Under the Sun. So nothing's really changed. It's just a different era. So we look at the March on Washington, we look at the suffrage movement, we look at the white women then and the white women now, and we look at the Republican convention. And I think we'll see that things have really actually gotten worse. What struck me about the Republican convention is they were only trying to reach one audience. They weren't trying to expand the tent, and they weren't trying to explain to the country what they could do to make our lives better. What they did was pat themselves on the back for being in the forefront of racial and misogynistic and all kinds of negative things. And they reinforced it, not only with the people that spoke for the so-called Trump family, but also some of our people who have our skin but are not our kin. And so I watched it and I was really surprised, actually, because I really didn't want to watch it because I really didn't want to give them the ratings, but I have to, as a political scientist and as a person who speaks, I had to know what was going on. And I was looking for them to outdo the Democrats in expanding and letting the world know and the country know and all of its people how great the president's going to make. And he really didn't do that. As a matter of fact, they did the opposite. They reinforced all the negatives and did not highlight any of the positives. And they pretty much ignored COVID because there's no excuse for what he did. And so nothing new under the sun. I don't think I'll watch it anymore. I think the circus is about to leave town, and I'm ready for it to go. I don't have any words of wisdom for you on that. If you watched it, you know what I'm saying. There was nothing of any real value that we could take away. There was no appeal or any interest in appealing to the interests of our people. The people who look like us did not speak for us and did not speak to us. They spoke about their own personal experiences of not ever experiencing anything that would indicate that the president is racist. So I didn't take much away from that, but here's what I did run into. In my production room, where they're setting up to film our children, was a young man who's got to be no more than 20. And he told me unequivocally that he was not going to vote. And even if he decided to vote on the down ballot, he would not vote for president, because if he did, he would vote for Trump. Well, can you imagine how my life changed in that moment, which was about 2 hours ago?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just amazing to me. If it was just him, it wouldn't have bothered me, but it was him reflecting the generation of young people who do not see the value in voting and cannot see the difference between the two people who they're voting against. So I'm saying that we have similar challenges now than we had 30 years ago during the March on Washington. There was a lot of dissidents. Some people showed up, some people objected to it. Some of the younger people, like John Lewis, who showed up and spoke, was considered more of a conservative, in case you all don't realize that. By his colleagues, by his age group, he was considered conservative, maybe even beyond that in the terminology. They might even say somewhat of an Uncle Tom, because he was speaking to the issue of discrimination and racial discrimination and segregation. And there was a Black Power movement that was speaking to the white nationalism and Black pride. And so those divisions and those separations were there then. And I am saying now, with the March on Washington coming up on Friday, which I hope God, gives us all protection for that, because I don't necessarily think that we'll all be safe doing that. But let's just say we do. There is still a fraction and segments in this country of our people who do not see the value in that.
Right.
They don't understand what the purpose is right now. So I think there's a debate that's going on internally that externally is not that obvious, unless you are in voter suppression, like many people are doing. Then they're getting these young Black guys to be very negative about voting and very negative about the Democratic Party or the Democratic nominee. And so we have an internal struggle that ultimately may hold us back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just look at where we were in March on Washington originally, where we are now, we're in the same situation. We have Black people who are disagreeing with each other in terms of very important issues. My position is, however you vote, vote.
Yeah.
But do not vote. And do not litigate our internal business for the public to utilize. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, and the internal struggle and the getting the issues out, I think, is exactly why we continue to have these kinds of conversations, so that we can hear from people about the issues. And I think once we really, because at the end of the day, you're right, it's really not about these personalities, if you will, who happen to be on the ballot. It's really about how our community hears those things that it finds importance to its daily life. That thing that's waking us up at 3 o'clock in the morning because we don't really have the answer for, but it's crucial to our survival, be it about our health, be it about our paycheck, be it whatever. And so I think you are definitely have helped us set the stage for this conversation. And I thank you so much. I'm going to
Can I just add one thing before you go?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about all of those things, but it's also about our very lives. Because with this young man, I looked at him and said, do you realize
that's right,
that your life is in danger? Are you watching what's going on in this country?
Yes.
Since George Floyd, there's been at least 4 Black people who have been killed or shot by the police. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there's no let up on it. It looks like they're saying go forward with it, that you are being given the support and the green light from a whole system. So it's about our lives, because our lives are at danger. So I'm sorry, you can go on.
No, absolutely. That was a very important point, and you are right. And just as they are hitting the gas against us, we have to hit the gas and moving forward and making sure that these issues are not only known but understood, that we understand that when we hear these messages, what do they mean? And sometimes when we're looking at these things, these folks are talking in a little bit of code. So we need some
Yes.
decoders. We need some decoders to be out here to help us figure this out. And I think, you know, at the Black Women's Roundtable, we always talk about three things. We talk about being healthy, wealthy, and wise. And one of the things that is sometimes so overlooked is how important the environment is. I mean, you can't do anything if you don't have clean air and clean water. And we're not seeing that as part of the conversation as an example. So I'm going to bring on Felicia Davis from the HBCU Green Fund. And I just want to simply ask you, how important is the environment to Black women in our communities? And what are some of the environmental justice policies that we need to see amplified by these presidential candidates?
So, Holly, I want to thank you for including me in this forum. And of course, I want to.
Yes, I'm loving that. I'm loving that. That has all the power people on it. Yes.
It keeps going and there's a back. But,
oh, Lord. Yes, we're going to have to get the link to that and get that one out on the network because you know how we do.
So I want to open up first by thanking Melanie, the National Coalition, and the Black Women's Roundtable, particularly for always including environmental justice in our agenda. And so I'm going to speak fast because I want to get a lot in. But with Hurricane Laura heading toward Louisiana, I want to remember the Black Women's Roundtable has been on the issue of climate justice for 20 years. So we were there at The Hague. We went to Durban in South Africa. We were there.
Our friend, did you find the hot sauce?
No. I don't know about the hot sauce. So somebody needs to go on mute. But so
we got it covered. Keep going, Felicia. We don't want to miss a word.
And we had a massive mobilization around Katrina that really exposed kind of the underbelly. And as people were reflecting back to the March on Washington, I wasn't there, but I was there as a child for the Poor People's Campaign. And I want us to remember that the Poor People's Campaign, which took up the charge from the March on Washington, went straight to the Department of Agriculture, where you're talking about people's food and water. But moving forward in terms of environmental justice, and as we recognize the first Black woman presidential nominee, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention and lift up Marquita Bradshaw in Tennessee, a Black woman environmental justice advocate that worked on the Cancer Alley in Tennessee, South Memphis, who is the Democratic nominee for the US Senate. So I lift that up, not to be partisan at all, but she's assisting the struggle that comes from the perspective that I live and breathe. So really important to keep that forward. But let us say, you know, we know food, water, air. We can live 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. So air quality, top of our list. Certainly the quality of our food, not only the quality of water, but access to clean water. So right now we're understanding with COVID-19, our communities are disproportionately impacted. And right away they say, oh, we have these underlying vulnerabilities. Well, where do they come from? They come from the environmental impacts in our communities. So we have to attend to what is our access to clean air, clean water. Why are we next to polluting facilities or polluting facilities put next to us? Those are policies, and we want to be at the table when we're exploring the placement of certain impactful industries, and also in the conversation around regulations. And then I just made a list because I knew the time would be short. So on our list of environmental justice issues, healthcare, gun violence is an environmental issue, green space, pollution and polluting industries, healthcare, healthy homes, that we have to live in spaces that are life affirming and not life debilitating. Policies and regulations. Transportation is an environmental justice issue. Access to new technology. So we're going to be owners and producers of renewable energy, whether it's solar, wind, or whatever else is to come. And then lastly, because we all being who we are and what we do have to make bugs. So the HBCU Green Fund, in partnership with the National Technical
Did
Association,
he poop when you took him out?
Awareness
Okay,
Week,
then he's fine.
Clark Atlanta University, Morgan, and Morehouse on September 21st.
Oh, there he is licking my foot.
21st through the 25th, there will be a virtual conference. So everyone is invited to plug in. But, and in terms of this convention, I didn't hear climate change mentioned, and that to me stands out when we have a hurricane headed to Louisiana. So with that, I'll close, pass the mic, and hopefully we have a chance, because there's plenty that I have to say about what I did hear, but more about what I didn't.
So much to say and so little time, and I'm trying to manage this and being in my COVID household with all my people.
I got to mention, Holly, the late Rita Samuels, because all of us, Rita always kept us focused on power, particularly for Black women. So
Yes.
Equality Day, she pushed all of us to celebrate this day. We did Women's History Month, but Rita Jackson Samuels every year lifted up Women's Equality Day.
We do not miss an opportunity to honor our sisters, past and present. We certainly appreciate that. I'm in this household managing way more than I should be while trying to conduct this panel. So I appreciate you all's indulgence. I'm going to move rapidly because we have so many issues that we do need to cover, and bring on some of our sisters from our Midwest and Northeast region, Reverend Dr. Judy and Tamika. Thank you so much for joining us from Pittsburgh and Detroit area, respectfully. You all have certainly seen the evolution of this economy playing out right in your areas, particularly around manufacturing jobs. So we cannot leave this conversation without lifting up economic issues. So tell me, what are some of the economic justice policies that you're interested in seeing our next president champion on behalf of Black women and their families and communities? And let's start with Dr. Reverend Judy. Reverend Judy, you need some help coming off mute? Nope, not quite. We got you though. And you have that beautiful background styling back there. We can see you. How you doing, Reverend Judy? You want to tell us about economic policies?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And also to Melanie Campbell. When we look at the results of the Pittsburgh inequality across gender and race, we discover that the report says that Pittsburgh is the most unlivable city for Black women, especially in the area of health and education and poverty. And so we are looking at the Mon Valley area of Pittsburgh also. And what we discover is that, the steel mills and the coal mines, all of those kinds of jobs are pretty much non-existent. And so we are, even in all of that, we are in the midst of COVID-19. And many Black women do not have the opportunity to work from home. So there's a lot of unrest here in Pittsburgh. We're seeing racial injustice in our area. And so in all of that, still we have several grassroots organizations and individuals who have their eyes on the prize. And all of us are at different levels in terms of actionable steps and steps to eradicate injustice. We recently had a solution forum, and what we wanted to see from the local, state, and the federal levels, and from our next president, is to increase in minimum wage, the ability to have employment, and we need transportation to be able to get there. We also need more assistance in terms of childcare, and we need a health care plan that really works for all people. And for Black women, we're looking looking toward the healthcare people to make sure that the equality of our life is such that you're not killing us, but you're making sure that our lives are longer. And it's hard when we have to make a decision between getting our medicine or paying our mortgage. And so we're looking at those kinds of things. And also, one of the things that we need here in the Pittsburgh Mon Valley area are people, Black women, who are on various boards on the local, state, and federal level addressing issues that concern us. And we have barely begun to face the opportunity for the betterment of Black women in the Pittsburgh Mon Valley. But we will not give up, and we surely understand keep hope alive. But now is our time, our chance as Black women to make a difference for ourselves and for our families. And so we will hold those persons that we have elected as officers and politicians. But you know what? If they don't address the issues that we have, then that means we need to find some candidates that will. And possibly we might have to run for office ourselves, because who knows our story better than us? Who knows our struggles, our pain, our suffering, our achievements better than us? And so we leave you with these words. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Thank you for this opportunity.
Boy, now if that's not powerful, you got the powerful background and the powerful statement. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. Let me tell you, if I was a preacher, I'd say, like my pastor tells me, now that'll preach. I would come see that. So next time you're doing your sermon on that one, Reverend Judy, put me in the pew on it. I want to make sure that we get Tamika in, who is coming to us from the Detroit area, representing our Michigan cohort. You're seeing some similar concerns there around economic policies. Tamika?
Yes, thank you very much, Holly and Melanie, for this opportunity. And so it is a disservice to follow after Dr. Judy, but I am blessed to be following after my big sister. And so in Michigan, you know, we relied very heavily on the big three. And when General Motors went through bankruptcy, the state of Michigan went through bankruptcy as well. Families were devastated, economies were devastated, and we have just started to rebuild that. Unfortunately, COVID happened. But, you know, and I tell people COVID has been a devastation to many of my family and friends personally, but it has also been an eye opener for this country. Policies that we are very interested in seeing be lifted up by the next president would be a living wage, paid family leave at the federal level, and affordable childcare. COVID has shown us that inequalities in this country have been handed to Black people and called progress. And we need to demand more starting now. While other countries have been providing basic human rights, the United States has put corporations over the lives of people, especially over the lives of Black people. We know that when COVID happened, I'm using essential workers. We focus so heavily on essential workers. These are the same group of people who we refuse as a country to give $15 an hour. So they're not important enough to pay a living wage, but they are vital enough to put their lives and their family lives on the line to run the grocery stores, to do some of the basic services that we need. We know that a living wage is important. When we were talking about unemployment, the $600 in Michigan that we received on top of the original $300 made people at $15 an hour. So when things were rough, you want to pay us $15 an hour, but just the basic right of having that is just crazy. Detroit was one of the hardest cities hit by COVID. We know that city is majority Black, and we know that majority Black people in Michigan have been the ones dying from COVID and experiencing a financial devastation. We need to, as Dr. Judy said, we are the change and the hope that we are looking to find. We need to stop relying on other people. We need to start relying on what happened a long time ago. We are talking about right now. This is a movement. If we allow ourselves to be pacified by some simple wins, then it will become a moment. We need to invest in our communities, in our Black women leadership, but we also need to make sure that we're investing in our children. In the state of Michigan, the school districts, it is very individualized, and you have very poor school districts not being able to give resources to children, and the affluent resources going to the affluent neighborhoods. And so in 15 years, we're going to see a horrible gap in education and income and just in class in this country if we don't do something about it now. So it is our responsibility as Black women to do that. And I am standing behind Melanie, ready for the fight. Thank you.
Ooh, y'all got me fired up today. She says inequalities have been handed to Black people and called progress. Listen, if I start running around, y'all gonna know why, because y'all done really given us some good information and some stuff that I'm about to tweet out. Y'all have made I'm gonna send this out. You're gonna see my whole tweet deck. So I'm taking credit for it now, just so you know. Let's keep it moving though, because we have heard from our sisters in the North, we know we cannot talk about Black people without talking to our sisters in the South. And so I want to bring them on next. Yes, get the cheering ready, because we about to go south on you. And we are so grateful that they are here. We know voters in the South, like Black people other places, but particularly in the South, have been ignored by both parties, right? We want to see a change in 2020. Has it changed? And if so, what should we be looking for? What do we want? What do we want those candidates to tell us and resonating to get those Southern voters out to the polls so that they can feel our power? I think I'm gonna start with Florida and work our way west. So Florida, Solandra, please help us out.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say good afternoon to all my sisters. All my sisters across the states, my sister leaders, and most of all, I definitely want to do a shout out to my sister leader, Melanie Campbell, for having this opportunity to come with my other sisters from across the state to have this conversation. And I could not do this work in Florida, so I definitely have to give a shout out to all my sisters in Florida that's doing a great work on the ground, that's part of the Black Women's Roundtable, who grinds every day, you know, with the camera, without the camera. They just doing it because they know they got to do it for their community and for the Black women. I just want to share some numbers with you all. Here in Florida, 850,000 children don't have enough food to eat every day when they go to bed. 4 million may go hungry if this COVID keep on going at the progress as it's going. 1.2 million more will be on food stamps, or what we call SNAP, as we continue to progress with this COVID, as these numbers keep on increasing. This is a 13% increase of people here, children here, and their families in Florida that would need a safety net such as SNAP. Also on around the healthcare issue, just in 2 months between April and June, Medicaid enrollment increased up 200,000 people just in that 2 month span of April and June of this year. Before COVID, 3.8 million people needed healthcare, and they got their healthcare service through Medicaid. More than half of our nursing homes here in Florida, the residents there really depend on Medicaid, and that's their health insurance that they go on. And then also 20% of our seniors here in Florida also depends on having that Medicare provision. And talking about, I heard my sister Tamika talk about it in Michigan about paid sick leave for all. We definitely need paid sick leave for all. We definitely need people to be having that conversation. We definitely need people to be making sure that that's running for office, make sure that's one of their top 3 tiers with healthcare. They definitely, all that comes in together, because listen, if we don't have healthcare, people getting sick, they're going to work because they can't afford to take off and to be able to help their family and provide for their family because they do not have the sick leave. Most of our women here in the state of Florida, we got a large number of households that's led by women that really depends on this safety nets of healthcare, paid sick leave, and the SNAP program. It's a safety net. It's not a handout. It's something to help people to be able to survive. And we need to let our politicians and the ones that's running for office understand that nobody's looking for a handout. Women get up every morning, going to work. Some are working 2 or 3 jobs, as Tamika said, not even getting $15 an hour, and they have to be able to survive and make sure that they families are surviving. Nobody's looking for a handout. We're looking for what we rightfully work for, what we rightfully paid our taxes for. In a time of crisis in our life and health crisis and food deserts around the state of Florida, we're just asking that these politicians understand, if you got it, then we should have it, because you could not have it if it wasn't for us. So that's the message. And unemployment is off the chain here in Florida. Right now we have over 608,072 COVID cases, okay, that we're dealing with in the state of Florida. They're going up every day. What did that mean that folks got COVID? As you already know, most people that got COVID, they can't breathe, they can't walk. We don't have women that we know in our own Black woman network that had died because they had to go to work. Left 3 small children because they had to go back to work. They called them back to work because they had to go back because our state did not want to fix the system and make sure that people got unemployment. So how we do that? Just go to work and then that'll go away. Then nobody have to have unemployment. That is not right. It's sinful. And and people talk about family values, and the Republican Party talk about family values. They talk about pro-life. Well, guess what? Pro-life is from the birth to your death. From the womb to the tomb. Okay, so if you want to talk about pro-life, let's have this conversation. And so these are the things that we really need to personally. Let me just give you a personal story. Me, as you see right now, and I have on a mask because it's serious. I want folks out there that's listening. COVID is for real. It is for real. I worked, as most people know, that I worked in the labor movement. Every job I had in my adult life I had a union job. I had benefits. I had health care. I had paid days, sick leave. I had all that. I was in a bubble, did not understand how important, because of my union and the negotiations, that what I had. Recently, I changed careers. I did not have that safety net of the unions. I got, I had to get health care. I got my health care. I went from, not having that benefit to actually paying. Literally yesterday, I had a surgery procedure. I had to pay $1,500 out of my pocket. Who can do that? If it wasn't for my benefits of my union, if it wasn't for my benefits of knowing how to save or whatever, people making less than $15 an hour cannot pay $1,500 out their pocket for a medical procedure that they need to have. My son, you want to know a personal story? I have a personal story. My son, college graduate, Black male, doing everything right. No drinking, no drugs. No, all of a sudden got attacked by some kind of health issue, end up in the hospital for 12 days. Okay, didn't have his job, didn't have sick leave at that point, 12 days, boom, he got to deal with this issue. Never been on food stamps. Now they tell him to apply for medical and food stamps and this, and he's like, this is crazy. This is what people got to go through, Mom. He's 30 years old. The things that he had to go, it made him have a wake-up call. So right now he's like, wait a minute, we got to change this system. You know what I'm saying? Because he had the safety net of his parents being union workers, having all that. He had going to college. He didn't have to worry about health care because of the Affordable Care Act up until 26, he had that. But now he's a grown man, moving not under the safety nets of his mother, gets sick almost to death. And guess what? So I'm very passionate about this. I'm not just talking about people that I know. It hit my own household. So what I want these candidates to know, that one, you need to get paid sick days for all. You need to make sure you improve the health care, not take it away from anybody. You need to make sure that our children are not going to bed sick, because you wanted us to have them. We got them. We're taking care of them. Now you need to do your part and make sure that they have food and they're not living in food deserts. And if they're living in food deserts, then you need to make sure the SNAPs is there, that they are able to have the safety nets that they need to have. Schools, public education, oh, please. You all need to really be talking about that. You want to send our children back to school during this COVID virus, but you don't want to have safety nets and you don't want to have safety protections in the spaces that you need to have. I'm talking straight to all politicians, from the president candidates all the way down to the dog catcher in my community. All these are, we're a circle of life, and we're going to hit. And guess what? We need to make sure. So what I'm telling our people here in Florida, I want you to mask up. I want you to mask up, and I want you to vote. I want you to get in some good trouble, like John Lewis said. Get your own house in order. Make sure everybody in your household is registered. They vote. Make sure everybody in your household have a plan. Make sure everybody in your household, make sure they know where their polling sites is. Make sure that and I want to do that. Okay, you got to go to the polling site. Make sure it's mail ballots. Make sure your mail ballots. Get those for everybody. Order them for everybody. If you just take care of your household, then guess what? And my neighbor take care of their households, and everybody on our block take care of their households, and everybody in our community take care of our household. We will see the change. We are the change, as my sister said, that we waiting for. And guess what? Start at home. Charity starts at home. And I encourage everyone that's listening, start at home. Get your house in order. Be everybody in some good trouble this year in 2020. Let's go vote.
You done said a whole word there. I think Reverend Judy and Tamika got you revved up and ready to go. Well, since you done invoked the great honorable John Lewis, we have to go to Georgia next. So I'm gonna bring on my sister, my soror, Deborah Scott, to tell us about what do we need these presidential candidates to know from the folks in Georgia.
Great. And thank you. This is always an honor to be with the sisters. Thank you so much, Holly and Melanie and my sisters on this call. Well, first of all, I'm a political science major, that, the Republican Party had basically gave up on the Black community in the 70s. So there was a whole Southern strategy to exclude us. And so, sometimes our Democratic cousins aren't as favorable to us as well, but they need us. And I submit that we saved the Democratic ticket. Black women, once again, saved the country and saved the Democratic ticket. And if we're not honest about our role in this election, then we're going to keep giving our power away. So I think one of the beautiful things about this gathering of women and women of color is we get to tell our own story, her story, especially on a day like today, where we're honoring not just women and women's suffrage, but we're honoring Black women and understanding that our role with the civil rights movement has only just begun. Some have think that we have overcome and we're going back, but I think for Black women, I don't know if we ever really achieved what we were supposed to achieve. So this is our time, and we're taking our country back. What I would say for Georgia, and we're always in that bubble about whether we're a purple state, a blue state, or a red state, is what I would say is we're a state full of Black women that are going to vote for this election, that are going to make sure that our family gets out and votes, that our community gets out and vote, and we're gonna go from the top of the ballot all the way down the ballot. So if you're not addressing our needs and needs of Black women in particular, you're going to lose. And so this is a nonpartisan message of respect the vote and power of Black women, and we demand it now. This election is not going to be just a one-day election. Every day of early vote is election day. We have to think about it as a 10, 12-day period and make sure we have the same strategy that we would use on election day for every single day during this early vote period. What we're saying here in Georgia, because we know they're planning, they test out the bad stuff here, as goes the South does, as goes the rest of the country. So they're testing it out already. We already know about what they're doing at the post office, but not only how that affects our vote, how that affects Black women, because Black women have been holding down the entire postal system since the last 30, 40 years. So you're affecting Black jobs, Black women, Black households, and our vote. So how many different ways are you going to try to steal this? And so what we're saying is, if you support Black women and support Black families, then everything you do, every policy that you're putting forth should speak to how does this impact Black women. When I look at the statistics about what's happening here in Georgia and look that we came so close, or folks came so close to electing Stacey Abrams, that was a wake-up call, because they didn't expect that kind of turnout for a Black woman that they didn't expect to win. So we can say that they stole it. We can say that we gave it away because some of us didn't vote. But what we can certainly say is that we made a difference then, and that's going to carry over to this election now. And that the power that we have now because of that experience, knowing that we have to watch every single move they make, from where the drop boxes are to who's watching those drop boxes at night, to where the polling places are, where the polling places are not, to the absentee ballots that are sent out with the wrong return address, to the purging of the electorate every single day, that we're telling people not only register, make sure you're registered, make sure everybody in your family is registered, make sure you know where you vote. If you get an absentee ballot, make sure it has the correct return address on it. Make sure you have a stamp, and if not, we'll provide one for you. But then also make sure that you really study the issues and the candidates and go all the way down, answer your census, but then take that vote, if you can, actually to the polling location or to the county versus putting it in the mail. Because we want to make sure, you know how you say you measure twice and cut once? We want to make sure every single step of the way that we protect our votes. We know that Black women have been vulnerable since we got to this country, and not too many folks have our back. We're going to have our own back, and the community back, and the government's back. So what we're going to have to do is make sure that we work together. And I love the Black Women's Roundtable because that's what we do.
That's right.
We're going to work together, but we're going to make sure that from soup to nuts, from the 1866, our vote, to the making sure we have enough poll workers, to hiring poll monitors, to making sure people go and apply for these jobs, making sure people are registered to vote, making sure that they turn out, make sure that they stay at the polls, don't leave the polls. We're going to adopt polls to make sure people don't leave. We're going to do party at the polls. We're going to do rain dates at the polls. Whatever we can do to make sure they don't steal it from us again. And if they do try to steal it, that we have the facts and that we know that we're watching them every step of the way. So I just want to say thank you. I know time is running short, but I just wanted to just let you know that this call has been so empowering, starting from the beginning with Cleola's story about the March on Washington. You know, I was a 1965 baby, so I was born in the revolution and born in the struggle, but it's so wonderful to hear these stories of our elders that have gone through some things. But as we, in those of us in our 40s and 50ish, it's our job to make sure that next generation, that Black youth vote young ladies, that make sure that they get what we got. And whether they sat us down, our elders sat us down and taught us, or whether we just, me and Melanie, we stayed in the room. When the men started winning, we just stayed in the room and tried to get as much information as we can. We want to make sure we're intentionally training these young warriors on how not to just vote, but to protect your vote. Thank you so much.
We are so honored and privileged that you stayed in the room. Ladies, the power conversation has continued, okay? Yeah. We are laying it out. I think y'all are reading all my talking points, so I'm not going to have much to say when this is over, which is fabulous. We got to get Letitia Daniels-Jackson in here, and I want to just remind you, we know what has changed. What do you believe has changed with this 2020 presidential election? And if so, what? How? And then, again, speaking from the South, what are the issues that resonate with voters at the poll in November from Alabama? So Letitia, take us away.
Well, hello, my sisters. First of all, I want to lift up our leader, our sister leader, Melanie Campbell, who always makes sure that we are at the table and that we have the resources that we need to be in this fight. So I just want to lift her up and tell her thank you. And we continue to cover her in prayer. One of the things I'd like to talk about is we talked about earlier about how Black voters vote in the South has always been taken for granted. And if that's changed, and what are we hearing from our voters, as well as the issue that you raised earlier. So I wanted to just give an example of what happens in a deep red state when we actually engage our constituents, our voters, and get them to actually turn out. So we all know that during the 2017 special election, where we had in Alabama to fill the U.S. Senate seat, we know that after that election, we got a lot of attention about Black women and Black voters and our influence in that election. Well, what I'd like to point out is that we've always been here, we've always been participating, but all of a sudden after that election, we started getting a lot of the just due notice of our vote. One of the things that I want to lift up is in that particular election, and I know that we're nonpartisan, but in that particular election, Senator Jones won 25 counties in Alabama. And of those 25 counties, all of them except 6 were in the Black belt. That means that were our voters, Black people that turned out in historic numbers. And we in Alabama right now are targeting those same counties where we have Black voters that make up 40% or more of the vote. And the only county that he did not carry in the Black belt was Monroe County. He lost by 32 votes. But if you look at the numbers, there were a number of Black voters that are inactive. So we're also targeting the inactive voters. The county has had a 41% Black voter population, which is over 6,000 voters, and just a little over 6,000 voters in the entire county voted. So we know where our power is, and we know how we have to increase those numbers. And so when we talk about the election and Black women getting their just recognition and how we have been showing up all the time, we want to make sure that we lift up the Black belt in Alabama, because the Black belt counties in Alabama is really where we're going to make change, and we're going to make sure that they take notice of us. That election was historic, and this election coming up as the presidential election is going to be historic as well. So what are we hearing? What are voters telling us as we talk to them, as we go out and listen to what they're saying? People are struggling. We all know that people are struggling. Jobs have been lost. There is food insecurity everywhere. We already had food insecurity in our communities. That has gotten worse. Children were not in school. So the one meal that they could depend on for that particular day, they're not getting. Our food banks are overwhelmed and inundated with requests. We have people struggling to put food on the table, so they don't have time to think about, well, where do I get a mask? How do I get hand sanitizer? Do I have PPE? So we're working with people to make sure we provide those resources. Unemployment benefits, that $600 that people were getting for those folks that did have a job and were able to collect unemployment, that has stopped. Many of them have lost their health care coverage. Others never had it. We know that they're trying to take away the Affordable Care Act. So there's a strong sense both of uncertainty and urgency that we're hearing from voters. And we're trying to tap into that to help people understand the importance of paying attention to this presidential election. We talk about what was and was not being addressed in the current convention. We know that our voice has not, and generally has never been at that table. And we know that our issues are never part of the platform. So that means that we have to make sure that our voters are educated. We have to make sure that we are reaching them everywhere. We have to make sure that one of the things that we're focusing on, in addition to voter registration, is we are making sure that people who are already on the rolls and have not participated will make sure that they get out and vote. And we are touching them in many, many, many ways. One of the things that really resonated with me with some of the young people that we're working with, that I struggled so hard with in 2016, is that they made a protest vote to a third party, to another candidate, because their candidate was not on the ballot. Now they understand and recognize the gravity of that situation and are dealing with the results of what happened by them not taking serious the importance of their vote. And I'm seeing young people taking this election serious. I'm seeing young people talking about never, ever again. I'm seeing young people talk about we can't take anything for granted because they are now feeling the results of that decision that they made when they made a protest vote or decided to stay at home. So I am very, very hopeful and very, very, I'm very excited about what the possibilities of what we're going to produce here in the state of Alabama. I'm very excited about what is happening. The issues that people want the presidential candidates to address are bread and butter issues and social justice issues and criminal justice issues. We just had an incident with the police the other day right here in Alabama. We have my husband runs a community garden in a food desert where the police are regularly stopping people while walking. You get stopped Black while walking. So the criminal justice issues are permeating with our young people and with particularly our Black men in these communities. So I think in the thing that has resonated the most with people, I think, is the fact that they are hurting and they feel the hurt and they are struggling and they know that unless they do something, and one of the things that we tell them, if you don't think your vote counts, why do you think they are doing so much to make sure you don't vote? Why do you think they are putting every barrier in place to make sure that you don't vote? Your vote counts. If it didn't count, they wouldn't even be bothered about whether you vote or not, or whether or not you have access to the vote. So we see our young people. I'm really excited about what our young people are doing. I'm really excited about the focus that we have, and our attention is on the southern part of the state. Our attention is in that Black Belt region where we are focusing on increasing the voter turnout, and we want it to be higher than it was for the 2017 special election. And if we can pull that off, we will shock the world about what Alabama can do.
Thank you so much. Boy, we have just been passing the power baton around, and we've had everyone to get a shot at it. So we are actually at time, but I cannot end this conversation with asking you one last, and this is going to be round robin. So we just want a one or two word answer from each one. We know we need the sisters. We know we need the brothers. We know we need the youth. Basically, we just need everyone. And you all have shared so completely about some of the things that you're doing. So give us one thing. If I'm listening to us right now and I want to make a vote plan and I'm going to write down what's to be in that plan, I want each of you in real quick, give me as we go around, and I'm going to look at all the boxes so I can just go through the boxes and we can see everybody responding at one time. One thing you have that people need to do to get ready to vote in this election so we can reach those record numbers. And I'm going to start at the top of my box with Solandra. Solandra, what's your one thing?
First thing they all need to do is make sure that they register the whole family, not individual, the whole family. Make sure you do a voter registration drive in your own family.
Yes, love it. Voter registration. I'm going right down the line. Reverend Judy, what's your one thing? Got to get you off mute, Reverend Judy. You all can take yourselves off mute so we can go fast. One thing, Reverend Judy.
Well, you know I'm technology savvy. So I think the one thing, the one thing I would think that we would do is to know that we have the power to make a difference.
Yes, yes. All right. What's your one thing, Tamika from Michigan?
It will be to take your ballot to the clerk. Do not mail it in. Take it, hand deliver it, or go to the drop box.
Yes, yes, yes. Deborah Scott from Georgia, your one thing.
A sample ballot. Print your sample ballot out and do your research before you even leave home. Take all your reading material with you and your mask.
Yeah. Woo! Letitia Daniels Jackson, your one thing.
Make a plan for you and your family. Make sure that you know who's going to vote, when they're going to vote, how they're going to vote, and if they need to get there, you're going to make sure they get there. Have a plan.
Thank you. Felicia Davis from Georgia, one thing.
So all of those were great things. And in this time, We have to do everything we can. So you know your neighborhood, you know your street, you know your block, you know your family, you know your friends. You got to talk it up. You got to make it real, and you got to don't stop. We got to go all in. This is it.
Yes, and I'm gonna round this out with the illustrious Cora Masters-Berry. Your one thing, please.
Well, you know, Stokely Carmichael used to always say, who was my hero? Organize, organize, organize. So I would advise everybody to associate yourself with an organization and that has a plan for voting, so that you broaden your scope of the people that, you know, that you can affect, and volunteer to do something at the polls if you can.
All right, and we got a bonus. Thank you very much. And my one thing is going to be visit unitycampaign.org, where you can find all these tools and many, many more. Tanya Tyson, please take us out.
Okay, hello all. I am Tanya Tyson, and on behalf of the Black Women's Roundtable and the National Coalition, I would like to thank all these phenomenal sisters and warriors in this movement today for this phenomenal panel, and continue to encourage us to keep using our voices and be heard. And in commemoration of the 57th anniversary March on Washington, to reconnect and reclaim the dream back. And take this moment to thank Roland Martin Unfiltered for being our media partner. I'd like to thank our leader in command, Melanie Campbell, for continuing to always bring in Black women to the table and to be heard and to keep fighting this good fight. So with that being said, if you would like to know anything else about us, you can follow us on our social media pages at NCBCP. And to get more information on the Black Women's Roundtable, follow us on blackwomensroundtable.org. And thanks again for everyone who joined us today. Thank you. And thank you, ladies, for a great job again. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Holly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.